Hey everybody, today I'm talking about my top 10 most replayable board games. Now these are the games for me that give you reason to go back to again and again and again, because they give you, new strategies to try, new kind of cards to try, new scoring options, just lots of kind of variability in order to keep you going back again and again. I understand that the kind of culture of board gaming steers away from this kind of aspect of gaming at the moment, because there's so much new things or so many new games coming out every year that we tend to kind of play games a couple of times and then move on to the next thing. But we still demand replayability because we think we should be getting our money's worth, which is fair enough. For me, these are games that have really stood the test of time, games that are always interesting to go back to, and I've tried to take the kind of replayability based on the kind of base game alone into a large consideration. However, with some of these, I have kind of incorporated the expansions or an expansion or two into that, because those particular expansions, expand the replayability, exponentially. So. I should also mention that I've not included like living card games into this list, because obviously those games are built on replayability. Additionally, my personal tastes kind of steer away from these kind of lifestyle games such as Gloomhaven or the Seventh Continent, which offer you hundreds of hours to hundreds of hours of content to explore. These are kind of more cut and dry games, ones that you are going to dip in and out of, because my personal tastes are based on variety really. But I'll explain my options as we go, and let's get started at number 10. So at number 10 I have probably the lightest game on the list, and I should say I've got games that range from very light to very heavy. My number 10 is Sushi Go Party. Now Sushi Go Party is a very simple, clean card drafting game where you have all these different types of sushi. You have a hand of cards, you're taking one of them for scoring and then passing them on to your player to your left or the right, and at the end of the game you're scoring points based on how those cards work. So one might say, get 2 points for every one of these cards you have. If you have, a kind of a scaling set collection methods, or who's got the most of these cards gets the most points, and stuff like that. But the cool thing about the replayability of this game is not only because it's so affordable, but in the tin you get so many different types and varieties of sushi, which can change the games in lots of different ways. You can have more kind of aggressive games, you can have very kind of point salad-y style games, and you can really kind of cater the game to your own will really. So yeah, lots of kind of things you can trade in and out, and lots of things to explore. So that's why Sushi Go Party is my number 10, because of the pure variability of the sushi cards that can go into the deck you're playing with. So yeah, that's number 10. At number 9, I have another kind of card drafting style game with Citadels. Now Citadels is probably Bruno Feduti's most popular, most famous game. It's almost like a bluffing and drafting style game where you are kind of selecting a roll card from a hand of cards that's passed around the players, and then you are activating your cards in kind of chronological order, and you're kind of killing other players and what they can do. You can take money, you can build buildings, you can get points in lots of different ways. But a bit like Sushi Go Party, this one has so many cards that you can trade in and out in replacement of one another to really spice up the game. And additionally, the rulebook gives you lots of kind of pre-selected setups to really change the feel of the game. So again, you can have less kind of confrontational games, or you can have really aggressive in your face style games. Additionally, there's loads of buildings that go with this game that gives you lots of different kind of benefits and powers, and just different ways to kind of approach the game. And I really like that. So yeah, a game again that stood the test of time, because it's been around, I think this one's been around for probably 10-15 years now, maybe even more than that, and it still holds up pretty well. I mean, personally I think my tastes have gone off it a little bit, but I can completely appreciate how well the game's designed and the effort that's gone to making it give you reason to go back to it. So I really like Citadels for that reason, and that's my number 9. At number 8, probably the heaviest game on the list, I have Through the Ages. This is the new story of Civilization, which is the kind of the second edition of the game. This one is a very involved civilization building game where you are kind of taking a very primitive civilization made of very basic kind of primitive soldiers, and as time goes on, you're drafting new cards and buying new cards that gives you kind of new science, new technology, new governments, new leaders throughout the kind of the span of the ages. And you can really focus on or go down so many different paths and cater your strategy into doing lots of different things. The way this game is so replayable is I think it's it's a game that really does reward repeated plays. And I think if you have another player or two who are willing to put in the kind of emotional and time investment into learning the game inside and out, I think it can really reward repeated plays, because it almost gets better the more you know it. Because obviously when you first start approaching the game, it can be quite overwhelming. You don't really know the different strategy paths you can go down. But as you become more familiar with the deck of cards that kind of plays out throughout the game, then you've got an idea of what's coming out. You know different things to focus on. You can focus on military strength to try and dominate your opponents that way and kind of smash them down for resources. You can focus on really boosting your culture up. You can focus on really having a great science. You've got different events and stuff that you've got to try and cater. You've got to try colonize different different settlements by investing your military in them to increase your capacity to do things. So loads of things to explore. And you can't do everything in each game, so I really like that aspect of the game. So many things to, so many different paths to go down, lots of strategies, loads of cards, and it's just a fantastic game. That's on the heavy side of things. It takes quite a few hours to play as well, but if you are willing to put that time in, then it's definitely a great one. At number 7, I have the Isle of Skye. Now this is by Alexander Pfister, who's a great designer. This is a tile placement game that has lots of cool mechanisms in it, to be honest. The first of which is drawing tiles from a bag, and you're choosing kind of which ones to scrap off, and you're setting prices against those tiles, and if other players aren't willing to pay those prices, then you have to pay them yourself. But the thing that makes this game so replayable is the scoring options, because every game you are scoring 4 different criteria, and I think there's 6 rounds in the game. And in each of those rounds, you kind of score a pair or 3 of those 4 different criteria. But those scoring criteria are completely interchangeable. And I think the game comes with like 16 different versions. The expansion comes with even more. And even just the different order of those coming out completely changes the game. So you've got so much variability there. And it completely changes the feel of the game, because in one game, having the biggest river can be really important. The next one could be having the longest road. The next could be having the most cows. So there's loads of different things you can focus on, and every game does feel very different. And that's a great thing. And not only that, the way that the kind of variability is injected into the game is so simple as well, because it doesn't it doesn't change the way the game plays. It doesn't change the the cadence of the game. It doesn't change anything like that. So it's very simple to understand, but fundamentally changes from game to game. So I really like that about Isle of Skye, and that's why it's my number 7. At number 6, I have the Palaces of Carrara. Now this game is almost built on its replayability, because every game, a bit like Isle of Skye, you have different scoring criteria cards, and there's so many in the game. But this one, the way the game plays and ends is quite strange, because you actually have to have the different criteria completed before you can trigger the end of the game, rather than just the game ending and then you scoring based on those criteria. But it's a very simple and clean Euro-style game where you are collecting these different marble bricks and then building buildings based on them. You're trying to collect different symbols based on the different types of buildings you're kind of creating as the game goes on. Some might say, have a certain amount of money before you can end the game. Have a certain amount of these types of buildings. Have lots of different things. And again, the way they trade in and out is so different. You can go from very simple criteria up to quite advanced ones. And every game feels very, very different. A very strange kind of pacing to a game, but it's a great design by Wolfgang Kramer, who's a fantastic designer in his own right. And definitely want to check out if you want a game with lots of different ways to play. And that is the Palaces of Carrara. At number 5, I have Glenmore 2 Chronicles. Now this is a second edition, as you probably guessed by the name Glenmore 2, of Glenmore, but this one is called the Chronicles because the game comes with 8 different chronicles, which can kind of increase the complexity of the game and add new mechanics into the game. And essentially it's a tile placement game based on this rondel, and you're taking these tiles, placing them on your own little tableau, building your own little, more I suppose, and you're getting points in lots of different ways, and trying to kind of be as concise as you can, trying to, when you place tiles, you trigger other tiles and stuff. But the way the chronicles are added in just add up, well, first of all, the base game itself is got loads of replayability because there's lots of different things you can focus on, and those kind of different routes you can go down. But the the Chronicles themselves just add little bits of fun into the game, and you can kind of just add 1 or 2 in at a time. You can add more in at a time if you want to. You want a really involved game with lots of things going on, but there's like little things such as like boat races where you can kind of use movement points to move a boat down your river and onto other player boards and trying to get it back round to you, and stuff like that. So there's really neat little ideas, kind of little quirky things to really spice the game up from game to game and just give you reason to go back to it, because it's a really great game in its own right. And to be honest, from the core game alone, it does really well. But that extra effort that the designer Matthias Kramer has gone to is fantastic, and it just gives it so much replayability. And I think a lot of the different modules as well are created by kind of loads of really famous board game personalities. So I definitely want to check out if you like your tile placement games and you want reasons to keep going and going again and again and again. At number 4, I have Awkward Guests. Now, Awkward Guests is a game that I really rave about all the time. It's a fantastic deduction game, definitely the best deduction game on the market. And the reason why this game is so great is because of the replayability. The game uses this very intelligent deck system, where depending on the kind of cards you put into this deck for each game, it completely changes the story of each game. The idea is you're trying to kind of solve this murder mystery. Who killed the Lord of a Manor? What weapon they've used, what their motive is, and such. Do they have an accomplice? But the game comes with hundreds of different cases that you can play through, and I think if you got the app, it might even be hundreds or thousands more. So you're never ever going to play the same game twice. Every story feels very different as you are eliminating different options. It can be the cards might say things like a blunt trauma object wasn't used to kill Mr. Walton, and you're kind of checking all those off, and it might say, oh, he didn't go from the kitchen to the to the living area, and you can cut off that route, and you're trying to kind of make this idea in your head about what the murderer has done, where he's been, by deducing all different things. But again, the way you switch the cards in and out just completely changes the story on its head, and every game just feels very dynamic and very fun, and there's kind of loads of different kind of complexities as well. You've got very easy cases that aren't that easy, to be honest, or very difficult ones where you've got lots of kind of red herrings in there. But just a great game that I've played this quite a few times now. I'm not even slightly bored of it because it is so much fun. At number 3, I have my second game by Alexander Pfister. Actually, this is Maracaibo. Now, Maracaibo was kind of one of the big heavy Euro hits of last year, being 2019. This one is a game, kind of a rondel game, as you're sailing around, I suppose, the Caribbean islands, playing cards, trying to fulfill missions, trying to get kind of helpers out onto the board. It kind of has a multiple card system, or kind of a multiple use card system, where not only do the powers count, they stand for certain goods and stuff as well. So not only are you kind of using these cards for different reasons each game, you don't actually use all the cards in every game, because there's a huge deck of cards and only a proportion of those are used for every game. There are so many strategies to go down. You can really focus on building up a money income kind of engine. You can focus on getting like a point kind of income engine. You can focus on bashing all these cards down to get lots of different powers. You can try and get all your kind of companions onto the board to get kind of bonuses. You can kind of got this almost like a stock investment style mechanism as you are trying to increase your standing with these different nations, and based on their control of the board, you're getting scoring multipliers. And on top of all of that, which offers so much replayability in itself, the game has this narrative to it as well. As you play through from game to game, you're trying to do these different missions and stuff, which has a narrative to them, and the game physically evolves as it goes on, as you're kind of eliminating spots on the board and adding new ones, adding subtle rules in. So it's got this real cool story to it, which is completely out of character for a Euro game like this, but it just offers that extra incentive to go back to this one, on top of all those other reasons I explained. It's a fantastic game, and one that just you can keep going back to. That is Maracaibo. At number 2, I have Trois. Now, Trois is a game that's, I think it's over 10 years old now, or about 10 years old. And again, this one really stood the test of time. It's a dice drafting game. It's another Euro-style game that looks it's got kind of a Marmite style opinion of the artwork of the game. You know, some people really love the way the game looks, some people hate it because it's got this very kind of stuffy medieval look to it. But the game itself is extremely fun and extremely almost modular, because every game you have a setup of the board, and you have kind of 3 different kind of genres of jobs you can do. You've got kind of your military ones, you've got your merchant style ones. I think there's kind of like a religion style one as well, and each of those different sections of the board have 3 different cards on them, which are kind of like action cards, and you invest in being able to do those actions, and they just change the game fundamentally. And you are basically using these dice to trigger these different abilities, and they synergize with each other extremely well. You're also trying to fight off these kind of communal threats that are trying to attack the city of Troyes, and you've got to kind of almost work together to try and fend those off and get kind of points based on majorities. But yeah, the replayability of this one is just purely based on those cards from those 3 different kind of sectors. And again, they're so different. Some of them are so fun. Again, they all mesh with each other in ways that you probably wouldn't even anticipate before going into the game. And by the end of the game, you kind of realize things you should have done. But by the next time you play the game, you've got a completely new setup and yeah, a new kind of puzzle to solve. And I really like that. The game does have an expansion which just absolutely skyrockets the replayability of the game, because it comes with so many new cards, and obviously the variables of that just is out of this world. And yeah, so probably, well, my number 2 most replayable game I've ever played, that is Troyes, a great game. And finally, at number 1, I have Legendary. This is the Marvel deck building game. This one is a bit more dependent on the expansions, but however, as I said, even 1 or 2 expansions added into the game just completely just transforms how many times and how many different ways you can play the game, because it's a very variable game in the sense that you are building decks based on different superheroes, and this game has hundreds of superheroes if you get all the content for it. And obviously within those hundreds, you've got thousands and thousands of different combinations of them. You've got all the different masterminds, which are the kind of big evils in the Marvel universe. And you've got like different ways to play, different ways to beat them, different kind of difficulties. And not only that, you've got different kind of schemes in the game, which is going to be how the game actually is won or lost. And those are very interesting. There's loads of different ways you can approach the game based on that scenario. Some of them might be simply as defeat the mastermind. Some of them might be stop certain villains escaping the city. Some of them might be stop civilians escape or being kidnapped. Or there is really too many to go through, because there is hundreds and thousands upon thousands of different combinations you can play. And I've got all the content for this one, and I'll never even scratch the surface about how many times or how many things I could do with this. But you can really cater the game to be whatever you want it to be. I think there's even options where you can play as the mastermind, which I've never tried. But yeah, it is just completely gargantuan in terms of its replayability. Not only that, not only because there's so much content for the game, it actually stays surprisingly controlled. There is not actually just completely wild expansions that aren't very compatible with other ones. Don't get me wrong, I think some expansions keep the game a bit more controlled by staying within their own confines of their own expansions, but it's certainly mixing and matching the different expansions is absolutely fine. But as I said, it really is a kind of a hole to dive into if you are really into this kind of the genre or kind of IP. If you do like your Marvel comics or even like the films, then it's definitely one to explore, because it is a game that you can just play hundreds of times and never ever play the same game twice. So that concludes my top 10 most replayable board games. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, please hit like and subscribe to my channel, and check out my other videos too. For everyone else, I'll see you next time on Chairman of the Board. Bye.